When you know what you want for the future, you need the present to line up with your goals. UCF Online offers more than 100 fully online programs in healthcare, engineering, criminal justice, and more, so you can get to your future and beyond.
From the University of Louisville's Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning.
And the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning.
I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And I am Tom Cavanaugh.
And you are listening to Topcast, the Teaching Online podcast. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Kelvin. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Here in the new year, this being our second episode that releases in the new year, but hey, pull back the curtain, first episode recorded in 2025.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Happy 2025. I'm going to have to get used to writing those numbers on things. And I'm sure I will mess up and do 24 on occasion until it sinks in.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of getting used to things that happens within sometimes I swear it's the first quarter of the year,
Although, where it used to really get me was writing checks.
I know.
And I hardly write checks anymore, almost never. So, things have improved with progress in technology, Kelvin. I'm not voiding as many checks as I once did.
Well, that's good. For those who might be new to the podcast, we should maybe plug this, that we do call this a collegial conversation about online, blended, digital teaching and learning, conducted over a shared cup of coffee. Do you have a beverage there, Dr. Cavanaugh?
I do. I'm on my second cup here, and I'm having my Gorilla Decaf. So a lot of times I'll do a second cup of decaf to keep me from being too efficient, too productive. You don't want that.
Can't have that. No. Can't have that. And Gorillas made your decaf.
Yeah, gorillas. Yeah, as opposed to the usual chimps, I decided to go with the great apes, the gorillas today. But yeah, I got a silverback down there who's grinding the beans and doing the pour over for me.
I'm just really wondering how they got them to go through that, that food service handling, cleanliness kind of certification.
They're very smart.
Well, they are, maybe smarter than me. You wouldn't want any foreign matter in your brown liquid that you're drinking. That's all I'm saying.
That's right. It's good though. Whatever they're doing, it's good.
Oh, that's good.
It's not thematic though. It's just, what I had. How about you?
I don't know that mine's thematic either. You can you can judge me as you like to do. I am drinking a single origin Guatemala, which is, I was looking back over the last few months, and the single origin Guatemala has become a bit of a staple. It's almost like a character in our show, Guatemala. But this Guatemala is a little different than usual because here I am in Kentucky, and it actually came from your neck of the woods, Tom. It actually is from Lineage Coffee Roasters, which is right down the street from the front door of the University of Central Florida.
I know where that is. That's probably closer to me where I'm sitting right now than I am on campus.
Oh, there you go. And so it is a lovely Guatemala San Isidro from Lineage. So there's an attempt at a connection in there if you can look for it.
Wow.
Not much of an attempt, but
at a connection if you can look for it. Yeah, right. I don't know, Kelvin. I'm still kind of recovering from the holiday break. I'm not sure my brain is 100% in gear because I'm not seeing it.
I know mine isn't. I'm not sure I see it either. I was thinking that, something that has become such a part of our work, like this single origin Guatemala, but with an unexpected label on it, the Lineage Coffee Roasters. Wouldn't necessarily think I would find that here in Kentucky, but I was able to get a Lineage coffee, which happened to feature the Guatemala on the inside. So I was trying to make a connection to our topic du jour.
I think I see it. It's transferable, you're saying.
Yes, a bit,
yes.
a bit. Yes. You want to kind of say how that connects, and then I'll introduce our guest.
So we're going to talk today about how chief online learning officers and others in the online learning space can maybe transfer those skills to other areas and maybe have different kinds of career path options. And we have somebody joining us today who has made that transition.
Yeah, that's right. So, Tom, you recently interviewed our colleague, Dr. Vicki Cook. Dr. Cook is the Vice Chancellor for Enrollment and Retention Management and Research Professor in the College of Education at the University of Illinois Springfield. Many listeners of this podcast will likely be familiar with Dr. Cook due to her active engagement with professional associations such as, but not limited to, UPSEA and OLC, notably serving as a board member for both of those associations in the past. With accomplishments really too many to list, Vicki Cook holds a PhD in Higher Education Administration and an MS in Adult Education, both from Capella University. Anything you want to say about the interview before we cut to it, Tom?
I don't think so. I think it sort of stands on its own. I do have some thoughts that we can talk about when it's over, but yeah, maybe we'll pick it up when on the other side.
All right. Well, through the modern technological marvel that is podcast time travel, here is your interview with Dr. Vicki Cook.
Well, Vicki, thank you so much for being on Topcast.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, there's a long list, but this one was sort of top of mind, is the transition you've made from sort of being the Chief Online Learning Officer at UIS to kind of a broader role for the campus overseeing enrollment and retention management. Something I've observed with you and a couple of other people that I know, more than two, that have made a similar transition from sort of being the Chief Online Learning Officer at their institution to having kind of a VP, Vice President, Vice Chancellor sort of role overseeing overall enrollment management to institutions. And I'm wondering if that's a trend as a kind of a career path for colos, and what that might mean for people who might aspire towards that. So as someone who's currently doing that job, maybe I'll just ask you the first question is do you agree? Do you think that this is a trend that's happening across the space?
I do think it's a trend, Tom. I think that colos bring such a broad view of the institution, very different than other administrative positions. And because of the skill set that we've had to develop, that we have to bring to the colo role, I think that plays well into other administrative roles that are institutional in nature, and one of those being the enrollment and retention management world.
So there's a skill set that's transferable. That's interesting. Yeah, because so much of the online learning leaders, the kind of expectation for them is to bring in new students in new and creative ways. Are there particular skills that you have drawn on from your online learning background that have served you maybe in another context?
Well, certainly being able to understand our students and today's students, and with the demographic shift, with the what has happened since the pandemic, all of the things that play on enrollment and retention management, we understood those as colos and looked to work with our teams to find solutions and to find ways to engage with our students and external constituents, which is a skill set that is definitely needed in enrollment management. I think the other thing colos do well is they really work with strategy well. And thinking about strategy at the enrollment management level is so critical. Also, colos are one of the positions across campus that has to understand not only what programs and degrees and maybe micro-credentials that we offer, but has to understand all of the processes behind how those things get to be a program, a degree, a micro-credential. And so building in that strength of process understanding with strategic management is critical to enrollment managers, just like it is to a COLO. The whole idea of a COLO works with so many different people across the institution. Enrollment management does the same thing. So working with faculty, with staff, with internal constituents, with advancement, with external constituents, all of the components where it's not just about working through academic affairs, or it's not just about working with student life, but it's that combination. And COLOs have done that really well over the years, and especially those institutions who've worked well with student life to figure out the student life components for online learners. Those are the kinds of skill sets that I think enrollment management really benefits from, and I have found have really helped me as I made this transition.
Is this something you aspired towards, that you sort of worked towards, or is this more, the universe dropping an opportunity in front of you and you saying, why not?
It definitely was not something that I aspired to. I was very happy in my role as COLO. I love online learning. I also love our community. We have such a robust community in online learning. And I think that is what really was inspirational to me. However, the universe dropped this opportunity. And so I agreed to an interim role. And then at the end of the interim role was decided to stay in the role and work toward helping the institution think about enrollment differently than we'd done in the past. And really, it's that idea of innovation and thinking about things differently that was helpful to my institution, but I think it's helpful to all institutions today. Higher ed is undergoing so much pressure from a variety of different areas, actually every area you can imagine. And it is so critical for us to think innovatively and differently as we are trying to address the needs of our students.
Could you give an example of maybe something that you've changed or you did differently, kind of bringing that COLO perspective with you?
Sure. I think one of the things that a lot of individuals were very challenged by was they thought I would want to make every enrollment decision related to online learning. And of course, you can't do that when you're in a role where you have to look at all of the areas. So thinking about the institutional broadly, but that was a different thought process than previous enrollment managers brought to this space, because they primarily were looking at that residential undergraduate student. And so we weren't doing a lot of work in the transfer space. We weren't doing a lot of work in the reentry space. And certainly not doing a lot of work in really thinking strategically about international and graduate students. And so thinking about that entire population is something a COLO does regularly, because they are trying to meet the needs of the various constituents that they're serving. And enrollment managers really have to move past that residential experience for students and think about the student experience more globally.
What about marketing? What kind of responsibility do you have for marketing? Because like in the online space, it just seems like, at least here, we do almost exclusively digital marketing because that's where the online students are. But that may not necessarily be the case for residential students.
Well, I've learned a lot about marketing. I work very closely with our marketing team. We have, I've been really proud of the changes that we've made with our marketing team. I found our director of marketing to be very innovative in her thinking. And we've done some research and really analyzed our data so that we know exactly which digital platforms are working for us with which audience and which non-digital platforms are working for us. And honestly, for most of our students, whether they're on campus or online, digital platforms are more effective than non-digital platforms for us today. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody because we all are engaged with digital material regularly. But I think that really analyzing that data so that we knew exactly which platforms gave us the marketing impact that we were looking at was vitally important. And our marketing team has just been amazing in thinking about how they are spending dollars more wisely and more effectively for yield. And so our entire marketing team was focused this year on yield.
I could see the kind of emphasis, the strategic use of data that a colo probably might bring, being of a benefit to maybe a more traditional mail out the view book kind of marketing of the past. I'm not saying that's what people are kind of always doing, but I think there's still an element of folks that kind of have that as their mental model.
I think so. I think you're right. And we are only doing a digital view book at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what was the biggest surprise for you when you entered this role that you just weren't expecting?
Well, I think the biggest surprise was trying to figure out what I didn't know. And so, which I felt like was probably a lot. I didn't know as much of the technical components of financial aid, things I had to learn so that I could make better decisions. I didn't know the technical aspects of the marketing at the level that I needed to know it for this role. And I think the other component that I really struggled with was the lines of communications, not including like the bursar's office. At the University of Illinois system, we have a system-wide bursar's office rather than an independent bursar's office. Those types of system-level components were things that as a colo, I had never had to be engaged with. And so those were things that I had to learn. So the learning curve was there. I put a lot of time and effort into going to meetings and doing a lot of reading and focusing on others' websites and figuring out what would be the best approach and asking a lot of questions. So I think that that really being open to learning is a critical component. And I don't know that most people will not think that's surprising, but I think sometimes when we've had a high level of success, we immediately expect ourselves to have that same level of success. And we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace and room to get there. And so I feel like anyone who's thinking about this type of a move needs to give themselves time to learn what they don't bring in to the position.
So that time was another question I had, because I still see you at online learning events and organizations, and I know you're still active, but you've got this whole other world that you now operate in. And I imagine they have their own professional organizations and expectations for involvement and service. And, how do you balance all of that? And how did you sort of decide where you should spend your time here versus there?
Yeah, that's a really great idea. I would say my engagement with OLC and UPCEA are things that keep me sane in a daily basis, and getting to see colleagues around the world that that we get engaged with, and we want to continue those relationships. And I think that the other components, the components with enrollment management, I have gotten engaged with the organizations both within our system, within our state, and then within the national organizations at a level as a learner, and making sure that my service component is also something that I continue. I think for me, my biggest connection is within our system. And so I do a lot of work within the system for service. I do a lot of work within the system with the other enrollment managers and within our state. And so we have a chief enrollment management officer meeting once a month. We work well together, and that type of connection is vitally important. But for me, it would not work for me to just say, oh, I'm going to cut off from my online learning friends. And also, the other part of this is enrollment management really needs to be engaged with what's going on in the online space. I mean, look at what we're doing with alternative credentials and micro credentials. If I was not engaged in those spaces, I might make some poor decisions regarding how we function and how we develop processes in those spaces.
Yeah, really interesting. It's good to have those kinds of local connections. We have a great network here within the state of Florida as well. If somebody wanted to make the same transition that you have made, what advice would you give them?
Well, as a COLO, you see a lot of institutional decisions being made, and you're making decisions that affect the entire institution. I would say be mindful of those parts of the institution that you are not working with daily. Be mindful of student affairs if you aren't engaged with student affairs daily. Be mindful of security and what happens with campus police departments. Be mindful of areas outside of those that we touch as a COLO. And then be very willing to learn. Continue to learn and continue to remember that enrollment management, just like in online learning, is all about the people. The people who are on your team. I cannot emphasize enough the value of the team in either space, and really thinking about the people and then the processes of management and how is AI going to affect that. Certainly another component where COLOs are very integrated. And then thinking about what your purpose is. So thinking about the purpose overall as a COLO, what that was, and then what just happens if you move to enrollment management? What is the purpose and how does that change from when you were a COLO? In some ways, it doesn't change at all. So before we clicked record, you mentioned that you are actually going to be doing a session or a panel at the upcoming UPCEA annual meeting on this very topic. I wonder if you want to give a little information about that and a plug for those people who may be planning to attend. Yes, if you're planning to attend UPCEA, we'd love to have you come to our panel. 3 of us are going to get together who have made the jump from COLO to enrollment management and talk a little bit about why and how we moved. All 3 of us who will be on the panel were previously employed at the same institution as COLOs, moved into that institution's enrollment management leadership area. So I think that those who might be interested in thinking about enrollment management as a career move, that you would find some of the insights that we'll share valuable. That will be at the UPCEA annual in March, and I'll look forward to seeing anyone who happened to hear the podcast. That's great. Well, Vicki, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience. Well, thank you, Tom. I've really appreciated chatting with you today.
Well, Tom, that was your interview with the famous Dr. Vicki Cook.
The famous, better than infamous.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the conversation. Vicki's good people and really smart, and this idea of COLOs moving into enrollment management is not one I sort of had on my bingo card a couple of years ago, but I know probably, 3 or 4 people that have made that transition. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be maybe not a coincidence when you have that many over the last couple of years making that kind of a transition. So I think it's interesting, and maybe a thing we ought to watch and talk about. So I really appreciate her coming on the show to share her journey.
Yeah, and quick reiterative plug, right? Vicki mentioned that conference session that's upcoming at the time of our recording and at the time of this episode's release. I believe the UPCEA 2025 annual meeting's in March of 2025. So if you're listening prior to that, we'll put a link to the UPCEA program where you can find that session. But I believe there's 3 or 4 folks on that panel, which is tagged with enrollment management. And I wonder, just to widen out the shot a little bit, I wonder if, Tom, some of this is related to what we might broadly refer to as digital learning becoming less niche and more mainstream as institutions recognize the importance of serving a wider range of students well, and recognizing that digital learning teams have expertise to offer, in particular colos, but maybe not limited to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Vicki touches on that, and I think there's some truth to it. I hadn't really thought of it that way before she brought it up, but if you look at it internally, the online learning professionals need to interact with all aspects of the institution. You have to kind of work with faculty and administrators and enrollment and marketing and admissions and the bursar. And you touch everything in the university in some form or fashion. So you've got kind of these built-in relationships, and you kind of at least have some working knowledge of how those different units operate. But then from an external perspective, and maybe this is more to the point that you're making, you have an understanding maybe of the changing student demographic. You're becoming more diverse. You're becoming more adult. The age is going up. The maybe a little more workforce oriented. Whatever they are, these online students are growing in size. And then as we look at some of the forecasts, the Nathan Grahr, the WICHE data that are looking at some of these enrollment cliffs that are coming, the reduction in the number of high school graduates. And if institutions want to keep their enrollment, they're going to have to make up those declines with other kinds of students. And guess what kinds of students they are? They're the students that the online professionals are serving. So I actually see a certain amount of logic in those kinds of people going into these broader enrollment management roles, because those are the students that they're going to have to start attracting. I'm not sure it's been quite so, intentional as that, but I bet it becomes that at some point in the next 5 years. And this is maybe like an early canary in the coal mine sort of indicators. We're watching some of these folks move into these roles.
Yeah, I think all that's excellent. And then I think to that, again, kind of broadening, I would say in our space, there is sort of an emphasis on innovation, which we've previously, Tom, you and I, have kind of operationally defined as new stuff that helps you do better, right? An emphasis on innovation and the ability to help other people and maybe institutions as a whole think about things differently. Vicki talks about that, thinking differently. And that's not nothing, right? I mean, a lot of our institutions, a lot of people in roles at institutions, we're like in our track and we're just kind of going down the road, right? And hence the proverbial glacial pace of change at higher ed institutions, right? Because, we know our stuff and we try to stay with it, but we got to shake it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. But, to your coffee connection, the skills learned in online learning are transferable into these areas so that you can add that kind of value as you move through.
So you mentioned like this real focus on a nuanced and deep understanding of who our students are writ large. Vicki talks about that. That's certainly a skill. Anything else come to mind from your conversation that you think is worth hitting?
Well, she talked about always learning. right? To being a kind of a continual learner, a continual student. And of course, obviously, anytime you take on a new role, there's going to be things you're going to have to learn about it. But, online learning is such a dynamic space that it feels like we always have to be, sponges soaking up whatever the latest thing is, whether it's policy changes or it's AI or it's, some new technology that's been launched, that we have to kind of keep up with the latest. And I think that is very useful if you want to move into another role, another institution even. I think it was, I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Shuba when she was on the podcast. Talked about, when she went into a new role, she looked at it as if it were another country.
Yes, that's right.
And she was trying, I've always kind of remembered that. I thought that was really good advice. And as Vicki was talking, I couldn't help but sort of think about that like if she were going into that role, look at it like you're in a new culture, in a new country, and you got to learn the new customs and understand the language and, what works here, what are the rules. And I think that maybe is a healthy way to approach it, but bringing all of the kind of knowledge and skills that you have with you and applying them in this new context, but you have to understand the new context first.
Yeah, and I think, two things that you all talked about that I think are worth a mention in terms of those transferable skills and those foci are really being strategically oriented, kind of zooming the camera lens out, right, and seeing things from a high level. And then similarly, maybe, but a little differently, thinking at scale. Right, scaled approaches to several of the things you all talked about. She talked a lot about people in roles, a scaled approach to that, a scaled approach to processes, a scaled approach. Even she talked about purpose, but purpose at scale. Right? How does that all work? I think in our world of online and digital learning, I think regardless of role, I think most of us function in those areas, and those are, as you say, important skills that are transferable.
Maybe the last one, as I'm looking at my coffee as I'm out, is her emphasis on kind of having a network that she can call on, especially as she's going into a new role. She talked about how strong the state network within Illinois is that she's a part of. And I know the same thing is here in Florida. We've got, at least within the online learning community that I'm a part of, we have a very strong network. But there are others outside the state that we can call, and whether it's through organizations like UPSEA or OLC or WCET or whatever. I think it's really important to have those connections. You can have an honest conversation. You can call somebody, and especially as you're learning a new role. I think that's a great benefit, and I think it's smart of her to sort of lean into those connections.
Yeah. I think all of that is quite excellent. Well, you want to, as you say, as the coffee's sort of draining from our cups and the minutes are sort of draining from our hourglasses, you want to try to wrap this up, put the plane on the ground?
Sure. Those of us who work in digital learning have generalizable skills that are more broadly applicable to institutional needs than a lot of us realize. Chief Online Learning Officers in particular are poised to move into these other strategic institutional roles as we all seek to better serve a diverse set of potential learners.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
No, that's good.
Yep.
No, that's good.
So thank you to Vicki for being on the show. Thank you to the 3 or 4 gorillas that made my coffee. I appreciate that. And thank you to you, Kelvin.
Well, thank you to you, Tom, for continuing to have these collegial coffee conversations. And thank you to you, dear listener, for showing up with your beverage of choice and finding some value in all that we're chattering about, like gorillas in the cage.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Until next time, for Topcast, I'm Kelvin.
And I'm Tom.
See ya.